Hey guys, I'm Naya and welcome back to the channel. So before we get started today, I actually have a quick announcement to make. I will be doing a giveaway for a DPE from the Megatins because my birthday is on October 1st, which is this Saturday. So all you need to do to win this DPE is you need to comment anything on this video, of course like it as well, and be sub to the channel, and I will be choosing a winner in my next video or sometime around that. So yeah. So for today's video, I decided to do another one on the topic of rulings. As you all know, I'm very fascinated by them, and I actually chose purposely 5 different ones for the top decks represented in the meta right now, and I think it's a lot of interesting ones, maybe some new ones to you. If there's anything like useful that you take away from these videos, I always love to know in the comments down below. And before we get into it, I also just want to quickly shout out my patrons: Dudley Reiner, Crimson, Conster, 10, Nude Banner, Damakus Whitewood, Jonah Rodriguez, Ariel Kersey, and Roy Air. I'm very much grateful for your support, and if any of you guys want to support me on Patreon, you can always find the link in the description below. So for the first one, we are taking a look at skipping phases. So this is a ruling dedicated to Runic and also Dugares in the Tearlaments deck, because some people still use it. I think Spell Canceller is still a really good addition to the deck. So when it comes to skipping phases, what happens when with the Runic deck you skip your battle phase? Basically, if you want to skip the battle phase, you need to actually attempt to enter it. So how you would perfectly go about skipping your battle phase would be to say, okay, I'm attempting to enter the battle phase, I'm entering the battle phase, but it's skipped due to the effect. I will now be entering the end phase, and then you just pass to your opponent, because if you don't conduct your battle phase, you cannot conduct your main phase 2. So you cannot attempt to skip, attempt to enter it, skip it, and go to main phase 2. This cannot be done. You just pass to your opponent. So if you don't declare this, that you're trying to enter the battle phase, what's going to happen is the game is going to quote-unquote force you to skip the next one available, which is your next battle phase, because you never attempted to enter it. And then quickly, when it comes to skipping the main phase, what you can do is, because the goddess obviously makes you skip either the draw phase, the main phase, and so on, but we are taking a look at main phase right now, because when you attempt to go into it, again, you need to attempt to go into it, it gets skipped, but then what happens is you either go to battle phase or you go to end phase. You cannot skip the battle phase, because to go into the main phase 2, it's always the case of main phase 2 can only be conducted when you have conducted your battle phase. So you can either enter the battle phase or you can enter the end phase and then just pass. So this is just a couple words on skipping phases. It's really important to differentiate those things and just to make sure you always attempt to enter it. So the next one is not a specific deck, it's actually just a specific card, Ghost Mourner, because a lot of hand traps have been starting to see play, because if you want to run hand traps in your deck, at least right now in my opinion, you need to play a lot of them. So Ghost Mourner has been seeing play as well, just to have the 7th, 8th, and 9th copy of Impermanence in your deck if you play Impermanence Invader as well. So Mourner is really interesting because it's a trigger effect, and it's also just a bit different from how something like an effect veiler would work, because with it being a trigger effect, you cannot just choose when to place it on a chain when trigger effects go on chain, as opposed to it maybe being a quick effect, and then you could do that and there would be no problem. So what happens with Ghost Mourner, it being a trigger effect, if during your opponent's turn they are special summoning and you obviously use Ghost Mourner, then it's pretty easy. Basically, the turn player will always place their trigger effects on the chain first, and then you chain on top of it. So if they special summon a monster, maybe use it on summon effect, you chain Ghost Mourner and you successfully negate it, because you're not a turn player, so you can go on chain last and resolve last, therefore negating the first effect. But then it gets a bit trickier when it's used during your turn, because during your turn, since you're the turn player, your trigger effects will go on chain before your opponent's trigger effects. So a very common example is something like Guardian Chimera, because they use Branded in Red during your turn if they're the Despia player. So what happens is Guardian Chimera will activate on summon, but your Ghost Mourner needs to go on chain first, because both of them are trigger effects and you are the turn player. So you would essentially be sort of forced to waste the Ghost Mourner if you're trying to use it, because you would be unsuccessful at negating the Guardian Chimera, because what would happen to the chain would be Ghost Mourner would be chain link 1, Chimera would be chain link 2, and then it resolves first, and then later it would get negated after it has successfully resolved anyway. So that really sucks. Don't use Ghost Mourner on your turn if you're going to be forced to put it on chain first, and it's just going to be a mess. So don't do it. But what you can do And why I'm also mentioning it, as we all know, Artifact Scythe was not hit on the ban list. So with it being legal, when it's a mandatory effect, now this is the difference, because when they use Scythe during your turn, because it's a mandatory effect, it needs to go on chain as Chainlink 1. So even though you are the turn player and you would have to go Mourner as Chainlink 1, and then they would use the effect as Chainlink 2, like we discussed in the previous example. But Artifact Scythe being mandatory, it can go on chain first, well, it needs to, and then you can chain Mourner and you can negate it. So this is legit the only useful interaction you have during your turn, and I figured it would be interesting to bring this to your attention if you maybe didn't know about this. So yeah, moving on to the next example. Now the next one is going to be in regards to the Tearlaments deck. Basically what happens if you Book of Moon your opponent's Tearlaments monster and they have something like a Salik set. So Salik is among all traps the one that sees the most play, so we'll be adjusting Salik, but all of them work the same way because you need to control a Tearlaments monster in order to activate the trap card. So if your opponent uses a Book of Moon on your Tearlaments, you cannot activate the card. So you know it used to be a Tearlaments monster. Your opponent knows it used to be a Tearlaments monster because they used Book of Moon. But the game doesn't know that the face down monster is a Tearlaments monster, because a monster when it's face down doesn't have its stats, its attribute, its effect, like name, like nothing. It's just a blank card. Monster card obviously, but it's just blank. It doesn't have anything, so the game cannot recognize it being a Tearlaments monster, so it would be illegal to use something like a Tearlaments trap card. Now the only difference to keep in mind is that when it comes to Tearlaments Salik in particular, because it's a continuous trap card, its activation is still legal because you don't need to use the effect on activation. So flipping up Tearlaments Salik is perfectly fine, but we are only talking about it being illegal when it comes to activating the effect. So because Meta Noise is just a normal trap card and Crime is a counter trap card, and both of them do need you to control a Tearlaments monster, then the activation would be illegal. But when it comes to Salik, it's just the activation of the actual effect. So for the next one, I actually saw this one specifically on Judges Lounge. Someone asked, and I figured it would be interesting to include it in this video, and it's a Mathmech ruling. And what the ruling is, basically, if Superfactorial is used and it special summons the monsters to a zone, one of the monsters, to a zone Cyberse Wicckid points to, and then uses all of them for the summon, but summons the either Xyz or Synchro monster in another zone. And the question was, would Cyberse Wicckid trigger in the next chain? Because it triggers if a monster is special summoned to a zone it points to. But then the question is, does it realize that the monster was special summoned there because it was mid-chain and then it left the field and was used for another monster which was summoned in another zone? And what the answer is yes, because it just needs to, quote unquote, again, see that the monster was summoned to its zone. So even though the monster is not physically there anymore, the Cyberse Wicckid will trigger in the next chain. And then as for the last one, we have Scareclaw. So basically just the Scareclaw link one. And I just read about this ruling today, actually, and I figured I've purposely kept it until the last one because it doesn't have a definitive answer. And I just wanted to bring it to your attention. Again, I saw it on Judges Lounge. I just adore the fact that this group exists. It's a tremendous help, and like shout out to everybody answering over there. I have asked questions myself many times and got them answered. So it's just, Judges Lounge is amazing, basically. And the question is, if the card Link into the Vrains can be used to summon Scareclaw Lightheart. So after I stop coughing, I will read the effects to you word by word. I want to read them so we're all on the same page as to what's going on. And basically, the spell card says that special summon a monster from your hand, but negate its effect. Then immediately after this effect resolves, Link summon one Link monster using monsters you control as material, including that monster. So basically, special summon one monster from your hand, negated the effect, Link summon. And then Scareclaw Lightheart has a really interesting part of its sort of restriction. For this card's Link summon, you can only use monsters in your main monster zone as material. And then obviously the question was, if the spell card special summons from hand, and then it needs to use that monster as well, if it can actually go into Lightheart, because it would need to use monsters from the main monster zone. So the card being used for this, like the summon and the effect for Link into the Vrains, is not physically in the monster zone yet. Like at the time of activation, it's in the hand because you special summon it from the hand. So can Lightheart actually use it because it wasn't physically on the field, on the like in the main monster zone, to be considered like a valid material. And I've read everything. Like, some people say no, some people say yes, and it's actually like really, really interesting, because theoretically, like, if you just read through the cards, a lot of people said, and it was my speculation at the beginning as well, when I first thought about it, like, if you actually have a monster in the main monster zone, which would be a legal material for Lightheart, then you could use Link into the Vrains in theory, because you activate it, there is a monster in the main monster zone, you do special summon one from your hand, and then you just use the one from the hand for Lightheart. So because there was a legal material on the field at the time of activation to like go into Lightheart with it, then you just use the one from hand to fulfill the requirements of Link into the Vrains, because it needs to use the monster as well. So hopefully I'm making sense. It sounds a bit confusing, but like, I don't know, to me, this explanation made sense. But people said that from an OCG ruling, basically I think the email was sent to Konami, and basically the ruling was no, that you cannot use it. And then again, of course, the question is going to be like, how is the TCG going to rule this? Just because if they are going by OCG, it's going to be no. Some head judges actually say that it's a yes. So someone commented that at their locals, the head judge said yes. So I don't know. I just figured it would be interesting to tell you this, all of this weird stuff regarding these two cards. Also ask you your opinion. Like, what do you think should be the ruling in this case? So yeah, I think that's going to be it for today's video. Again, like, I encourage you to comment so you can be entered into the giveaway. So yeah, good luck if you're going to be entering. And of course, as always, let me know what you think of the video, what you think of the rulings. Is there anything specific you would want me to make a ruling video about? I would love to hear your thoughts, your ideas. And yeah, of course, if you like the video, like it as well. Sub to the channel, check out all the social media, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.